Hey Optimancers, Chris here. Patron of the channel, Philip Bellamy, asked me to take a look at spells that you should be able to upcast, as well as spells that they just didn't make the upcast worth it. Of course, technically, you can cast any leveled spell with a higher level slot. Obviously, I'm talking about special improvements to mechanics by casting with a higher level slot. I'm not going to go over every spell in a video, so I want to go over 5 spells that you should be able to upcast, and 5 spells where they made upcasting just terrible. For each of these, I'm going to give my take on what I think upcasting these spells should look like. That means spells that don't have strong upcast options, but I'm not sure how to improve them, would not be reviewed. So, like Absorb Elements, you're a terrible spell to upcast, but I'm not sure how to fix you. Any spells you think you should be able to upcast but can't, or spells you think upcasting is a terrible idea? Tell us how you think these spells should work in the comments below. If you enjoy the content you see here and you consider supporting it, please consider doing so through Patreon. A link to my Patreon page is in the video description. Today I want to thank some of my top level patrons: Drew Terry, Eric Wasserman, FBK05, Gishlife, Gakumaru, Hendry, Hoerby, Ian Johnson, Jay Gimmel, Jack Harper, James Makla, James Sprague, James Thomas, Jeff Williams, Jadzan, Jod Matera, Jonathan Lexi, Joseph Robideau, Joseph Van Horn, Josh Davis, Justin Times, KJ Aurelio, Kurt G, LaFerja, IGW, and Marlon Rooks. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. Here's 5 spells where, although they can be upcast, the option is so bad, it's just not worth the slot. I put these in order of spell level. And we're going to start out with a first level spell, Healing Word. So, Healing Word's a nice healing spell. Bonus action to cast, nice range, delivers a d4 plus your casting ability score modifier in healing to a single target. But upcasting? An additional d4 of healing. Yikes. So if you have, say, I don't know, a +3 ability modifier, that'd be an average of 5.5 with a first level slot, or 8 with a second. Even with a third level slot, that's not going to double the first level healing. That's rotten. Seems to me that we should instead be able to affect an additional target with this spell per spell level. Now I realize there is already a mass healing word in the game, but that affects 6 targets with a third level spell, so we're in no way making that obsolete. Second, Flame Blade. Okay, so this one just doesn't make sense to me. So take a look here. This is the Dragon's Breath spell. If we upcast it, the Dragon's Breath we can do, which is an area of effect by the way, not a big area, but we can still potentially hit multiple enemies with it. Anyways, we get an additional d6 of damage for every level of the spell, with our action on every round. Then we have Flame Blade, which isn't good to begin with, but we make sure it remains super bad by providing an additional d6 of damage for every 2 spell levels. Why? This one I think obviously should have been a d6 per level. It's not like it's not using our concentration, and it's not because it's a druid spell, because Moonbeam gets an additional d10 per spell level, and it's an area of effect. I mean, this just obviously should have been a d6 per spell level, and I have no idea why they didn't do that. Well, we had Flame Blade, so let's talk about Flame Arrows. This spell takes an action to cast, uses your concentration, and it allows 12 arrows to be fired that do an additional d6 fire damage in addition to the regular damage. If we assume someone has extra attack and crossbow expert and is using a hand crossbow, they could do an additional 3d6 fire damage, potentially if they hit, per round for 4 rounds. I mean, honestly, that's not great. But you know what? We upcast this to 4th level, and what do we get? 2 more arrows. So that same character wouldn't even get 1 full round of damage from this. That's just terrible. I mean, it's not even a 20% increase with a whole spell slot level. Now it sounds easy to instead add to the damage, like how about 2d6 with a 4th level slot? I actually think that might be too good. I mean, we could maybe do every other level or something, but instead I actually think we should just get way more arrows. 3 times as many. So when you cast this spell using a spell slot of 4th level or higher, the number of pieces of ammunition you can affect with this spell increases by 6 for each slot level above 3rd. That's a 50% increase with a single spell level. That is totally fair. It would also make magic items like efficient quivers a bit more cool, because with a high level slot, you could affect a lot of arrows. Now, here's one that makes no sense to me at all. First, here's Tasha's Mind Whip. This is a 2nd level spell, and we upcast it and we hit an additional target for each spell slot level. I mean, that makes sense to me, and it's a pretty good upcast option. Now let's look at the similar Raulothim Psychic Lance. So this one is 4th level. It does more damage, and it can incapacitate a creature for a round. And what do we get when we upcast? A d6. Mind Whip and Psychic Lance were even published at the same time. I have to think they were written pretty much at the same time, and they have so much in common, potentially even by the same designer. But one has a good upcast option, and the other is terrible. Why? I think this obviously should be one additional target per additional spell slot level. If anyone has any thoughts on why this one got a bad upcast option rather than the obvious target per spell level like Tasha's Mind Whip got, I would love to be enlightened. Let's finish up our bad upcasting mechanics with Flame Strike. Now in fairness, instantaneous blast spells usually do have a single die added with upcasting. But here I really think there just should have been an exception. Flame Strike does 2 kinds of damage, 4d6 of fire and 4d6 of radiant. And when you upcast, you get a d6 and then you get to pick one or the other. Would it really have been a problem to make it a d6 to both? I mean, Flame Strike is already not a great spell, and it's 5th level, so we're not going to be upcasting it all that many levels. Maybe a slot level or 2. And the mechanics would have just been easier. 4d6 per damage type to 5d6 to 6d6. I feel like they've added unnecessary complication when they just could have made it easier and made the spell a bit better at the same time. Okay, so here's 5 spells that have no upcast mechanics, and it would have just been so easy. The first one is a bit more of a redesign, but Shield. Okay, so hear me out. I've made it no secret. I think Shield is a powerful spell, but I am also not sure, as written, it's good for the game. +5 armor class for an entire round. It's just a lot for a 1st level spell. Then there's no upcast option, though honestly, it's probably worth a 2nd level or maybe even a 3rd level slot if you really need it. So, what if Shield did have upcast mechanics? Like maybe 1st level Shield adds +3 to your armor class, but if you use a higher level slot, it adds +1 to your armor class for each spell slot level above 1st. So +4 at level 2, +5 at level 3, all the way up to +11 with a 9th level slot. I think that would just work a whole lot better. Second one, Wrathful Smite. Okay, so this, just like Shield, is already a good spell. However, Smite spells almost always have an upcast option for an additional die of damage when we cast them with a higher level spell slot, except for some reason, Wrathful Smite was excluded. Or maybe it was an oversight. An additional d6 of damage for a higher level slot is just so obvious here that you might already assume it had that option, but it doesn't. So the one Smite spell that we're actually likely to select, no upcasting. Now, I wouldn't rush to upcast Wrathful Smite even if we did get an additional d6. But, what if we're something like a straight class Hexblade, and then we're using packed slots? So do we want to expand a 2nd or 3rd level slot to do a Wrathful Smite and get nothing out of those additional levels? It seems to me this one would be easy, obvious, and I have no idea why it wasn't upcastable in the first place. Next spell would be Barkskin. Okay, so this is the first spell I'm going to cover that has no upcasting and is just a terrible spell. Use an action, your concentration, and a spell slot, and you get an armor class of 16, and you can increase that 16. Good chance your 1st level character already has an armor class of 16 or higher, and as you go up in levels, you're going to get better equipment, magic items, and a lot of characters are going to end up with an armor class of 20 or more. So who would ever cast this spell? Maybe a Moon Druid. Like, if you wild shape into something with a really low armor class, then maybe 16 is an improvement. But that's about it, and even then, Is this really the best spell that you could be concentrating on? And the spell cannot be upcast, even though it's becoming even worse as we go up in levels. And once the Moon Druid gets to level 10, well then suddenly they're doing things like wild shaping into armor class 17 earth elementals, so it has become useless for them as well. And the thing is, this would be so easy to create upcast mechanics. Like, okay, yeah, level 1, 16 armor class. And yeah, it's super niche. Then when you cast a spell using a spell slot of greater than first level, you've increased the armor class by 1 per spell level. So, level 2, we get to 17. Level 3, we get to 18. Level 4, we get to 19. Level 5, we get to armor class 20. Really, it would never become a powerful spell, but I could see use of it becoming more universal as higher level spell slots are achieved. Would my 9th level druid ever want to spend a 5th level spell slot as well as concentration for a 20 armor class for up to an hour? Probably not. But at least maybe. Okay, so this one just seems so obvious. The Levitate spell has no upcast option. Fly, which is a touch spell, has an upcast option, but Levitate, which has range for some reason, does not. And I mean, how easy would it have been to design that? When you cast a spell using a 3rd level or higher slot, you may choose 1 additional target per spell slot level above 2nd. So many spells in the game are already set up this way. I have no idea why Levitate was left off the list. Don't really have any more to say on this one. Let's move on. Next up, Protection from Energy. A 1-action cast that lasts up to an hour, and it uses your concentration. For the duration, the willing creature you touch has resistance to 1 damage type. And you know where I'm going with this. Again, it's just obvious. Like, why wouldn't we have a spell like this that you can upcast to protect multiple party members? And since they made it concentration, they've made it so you can't spread it around by casting it multiple times. Resistance to poison for multiple party members? Yep, that's no problem. Resistance to fire for multiple party members? No way. So yeah, again, just easy. When you cast a spell using a 4th level or higher slot, you may choose 1 additional target per spell slot level above 3rd. Not broken or too powerful, it just makes sense. And there you go. 5 spells that should have an upcast option that don't, and 5 spells that do have an upcast option, but it should be better. And my thoughts on what they should actually look like. And there are more, of course. Like, why are there any instantaneous damaging blast spells in the game without upcast options? I have no idea. Let me know your nominations down below. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.